Welcome into Training Camp Report presented by Advent Health. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith. Day 3 of camp. We're basically all pros at it at this point. Starting to get into the rhythm of it. Still no pads. We were just talking about that. That's coming in a couple days. But, man, it's already been a great couple days out here. And today is a very cool one for all of us. It's the Staff, Friends, and Family Day. Those are the people that are here watching. So all the players, coaches, business staff, everyone's friends and family get a chance to be here, which is really cool.
Friends, so.
You don't have any. It's all right. We're here.
Friends.
Yeah, like I'm here. That's all you needed,
Okay.
right? I'm already here.
Thanks, bud.
But yes, and yesterday it was so great because there were a bunch of fans here, and of course Mike Evans continues to always be a great guy who stays after and signs autographs. I love the cool pack on the head, like despite the fact that everyone is dying in the Florida heat. Look at this. He's just making this kid's day.
People happy.
I mean, they're he's like the Beatles out here. Everyone's screaming his name. Everyone wants the autographs. Yep. And I just love that he every year, no matter what, is always out there, which is awesome. And he
keeps cranking out hits.
And he does,
like
exactly, just like the Beatles, keeps cranking it out year after year. And besides Mike, we got to watch another wide receiver have a pretty big day out here, and it was such perfect timing based on what we talked about on our show yesterday. I love when they help us with that. As we discussed the idea of who the third wide receiver weapon might be, Jalen McMillan comes out and has just a monster day.
Yeah, it's a long way from being decided, so we're not saying that Jalen McMillan has won the third receiver job, but he had a very, very good practice yesterday, including, and I'll say he had 2 touchdown catches. That's at least, that's the 2 that I saw, but they were big plays. One of them was your classic back corner fade where he catches the ball over a jumping defender and then gets the 2 feet down. And then later they were running a 2-minute move the ball drill, and the situation got down to the ball at the 20 and 4 seconds left, and you had to get a touchdown. So the only thing that would win the game was a touchdown. And he caught the ball over the middle right before the goal line and dived in before the defender. And it was just, on both plays, he showed a lot of emotion afterwards and got, his teammates were very congratulatory. And afterwards, he just talked about how Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, he was like, what advice have they given him? The first one, which made me laugh, was don't complain about the heat. But I guess the point
I have not taken that advice in my years here.
Yes, no, we complain quite a bit. I guess the point is, don't make any excuses.
Yep.
He hasn't had to make any excuses for anything because he's been playing really well. But they also told him to be very level-headed. So that plays into we're talking about what a big day that he had yesterday. And he looked phenomenal, and he has through the first few days of camp. But he wants to stay level-headed, and what coaches really want to see from these young receivers is not one big day, it's stringing them together.
Yeah.
So being consistent day after day, because at some point during a 3-week camp plus the weeks that follow in the preseason, just about every receiver out there is going to have a big flash moment. But which ones can do it practice after practice?
Well, and I always think it's interesting. They talk about in whether it's OTAs or now in camp, typically the defense is ahead solely because of the idea of the way that game planning works, and it can take a little while to get some more of that going. So I think I love seeing some of the offensive plays, the chemistry between guys early on when, again, you have some new players, but you also have a new system, a new offensive coordinator. For it to not be where the defense is just outshining them consistently, I feel like is a really great sign about the offense.
Yeah, and they had a good day yesterday. I mean, to the layman at least. And the coach said that, yes, the offense had some good drills. They did a lot of move the ball drills. They did 2-minute drills and red zone drills, and it was just a good day overall. So you like to see that early on, them clicking, especially, as you said, with a new offensive coordinator. But one of the things that was notable about it was they ran a bunch of call-it drills, and that means that instead of having scripted plays like they usually do, they didn't have a script, and Liam Coen on offense and Casey Rogers on defense were calling the plays. And so, this is going to be Liam Coen's first year in the NFL calling plays, so this is practice for coaches too.
I remember they talked about that last year, that they did that for Dave Canales when it was his first year, and he mentioned how helpful that was for him, and even a lot of the players, same thing, that for everybody to get used to each other, to see what works, to see what doesn't. And man, if you're calling it against a Todd Bowles defense too, it's very helpful because everyone talks about how you just never know what he's going to be throwing at you, so that's a good start.
I think Todd will get it back. But he actually doesn't call the plays during those drills because he's serving as the down and distance guy and the refs guy, so he's making all the decisions of where the plays got to and if there was a penalty.
Yeah. That's interesting. All right, and then I know Rachaad White, it's going to be interesting to watch his role in this new offense as well. We've talked about some guys like Bucky Irving, but we knew that Rachaad was very much kind of that dual threat last year. There was a lot of passes and a lot of runs as well. What is it so far? Have we gotten any indication of what the Rachaad White of this offense could look like and what they're going to ask of him?
Well, he is glad that the Buccaneers drafted Bucky Irving, who has a good shot to be a complimentary back for him. He thinks the two of them can work together well, and probably the coaches would like to take a little bit off of his plate. But what he really liked, he talked to Brianna Dix, our colleague, yesterday, and you can read about it on Buccaneers.com. He talked to her yesterday after practice, and he said that he used the word palate, that this run game is going to have a bigger palate, and he thinks that's really going to make a big difference, so that defenses are going to have a harder time figuring out where the Buccaneers are going with the football.
Interesting. That's a good idea. All right, and then on the defensive side, one of the guys that I think is going to be really interesting to watch this year is Zion McCollum.
For
That
sure.
When you lose Carlton Davis, and it's interesting because last year, of course, Zion ended up playing more starting
9 games,
snaps, than the
Yeah,
other guys who were
that's true.
considered the starters
That's
because of
right.
the way injuries shook out, which has to make you feel more confident about him actually going in as the starter this year. But what are the things that you feel like you're going to be watching for him, and what they are going to need from him?
Well, what Zion himself says is he needs to get the football in his hands. So yesterday, it was a good day for the offense, as we said, but one of the standouts for defense was Zion, who made 2 breakups on passes thrown to Mike Evans, which seems even a little bit better than or just a regular
I
one,
would agree
right?
with that, yeah.
And they were really 2 really good plays, but as he said himself, I got to turn some of those breakups into interceptions. And then he said, now a lot of guys aren't, when you ask them, like, what's your statistical goal for the season? A lot of guys, as you've heard, they don't really say anything. I'm just concerned about, team goals or playing my best or whatever, or if they have goals, they don't share them, right? Antoine Winfield was a notable exception last year.
Yes, which, man, I mean, now
So-
I feel like I'd be doing that.
Yeah,
Well,
really.
it worked well for Antoine.
But Zion wasn't shy. He says he started telling his wife in the offseason that his goal was to get 6 interceptions this year.
Oh, boy.
And he just keeps repeating it to her like every day. He says he just keeps saying it. So it's almost like a mantra. Now, I don't know if that sounds like a big number to you, 6 interceptions. There were only 3 players in the NFL last year that had at least 6 interceptions.
Yeah.
And the Buccaneers, our leader was Antoine with 3, and the Buccaneers haven't had a player with 6 interceptions since Aqib Talib in 2010.
Wow.
So if he were to hit that goal, or honestly even get close to it,
Yeah.
it's going to be a great season and exactly what the Bucs are looking for. And like you said, he's played so much last year that gave him confidence and made him comfortable, but it also, you can tell every time that Coach Bowles talks about him. I think Coach Bowles is Zion's biggest fan,
Yeah.
and he has a lot of confidence in him.
That's interesting. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back here with more. For now, let's look back at some highlights from OTAs in the spring.
Every day's a resume. Y'all come out here with that approach.
Come out here, man. Let's keep grinding. Smarter team is a better team. We got to use this heat as our advantage.
All gold, no breaks. Hard work over hard breaks. We gotta win. All gold plays, 'cause we want it, yeah. 'Cause we want it, yeah. Okay, this right here, my solo. Okay, picture perfect photo. And you know the game always come with low blows. But if I'm rocking, you about to get booked. All gold, no breaks. Hard work over hard breaks. We gotta win. All gold plays, 'cause we want it, yeah. 'Cause we want it, yeah. Big rock in a hard place. No matter, we gon' keep pace. Gotta win. All gold plays, 'cause we want it, yeah. 'Cause we want it, yeah.
Welcome back into Training Camp Report presented by Advent Health. We always talk about the roster and who's going to be making what spots and who's going to be starting, and we always go into camp with one roster, but inevitably there ends up being a few
for sure.
little changes here
Tweaks.
and there. So I know one of those happened yesterday, so tell us about this new addition.
Yeah, we actually officially made it today, this morning before practice, but the Buccaneers signed a tight end named Sal Cannella. Now, the reason for this is because Tanner Taula, as we said a couple days ago, started camp on the active PUP list. He can come back at any time, but right now he's dealing with a leg injury, so they were down to 4 tight ends who could practice, and they clearly wanted one more. They like to carry 5 during camp. So we had an open spot because when you moved Randy Gregory to the reserve did not report list, that opens up a spot. So didn't have to cut anybody. We can bring somebody in. They did a tryout with a bunch of guys, tight ends yesterday, and Sal Cannella was the one they chose to sign. He's not a hugely familiar name, but he did go to Auburn. He was teammates with KJ Britt for 3 years, and he's been on 3 NFL rosters a little bit in off seasons, but never during the regular season. But he's played an awful lot in other professional leagues. He's played in the XFL, the USFL, and last year in the UFL with the Arlington Renegades, and led the league with 6 touchdowns.
Wow.
So, he's really worked hard to follow his football dream. He worked really hard just to get a shot in college. He wasn't recruited at all out of high school.
Wow.
So we'll see. But, yeah, there's the first addition so far to the roster. And like you said, there's always some changes during camp.
I love that. Now I'm rooting for him. Now that you said all that stuff that he's done, I'm like, dang it, now I'm really rooting for this guy. All right. Also, as much as there are also some odds and ends in terms of roster moves and things like that, there's also always, a little injury here or there, and you hope they're not big ones, but sometimes guys just tweak something here or there, and we know that Chase Edmonds has missed a little bit of time. So what has that meant for the rotation of this running back group and some guys that maybe we've gotten to take a look at?
Yeah, there he is, wearing a bucket hat on the sideline today because he hasn't been able to practice the last 2 days. Really, knock on wood, I don't know if this is wood or not. The Bucs are in a great spot right now, health-wise. Nothing major. Chase is hurt. Kayvon Merriweather hasn't been practicing, and then, of course, Tanner Tell and Zach Anixted. But pretty much everybody's out there, which is good. But, yes, you're going to have some minor injuries, and if Chase were to be down for more than just a day or two, like if it was more like 10 days, something like that, you could possibly see the Bucs do at running back what they just did at tight end and bring in one more. But in the meantime, they could give more reps to the two undrafted guys they signed, Ramon Jefferson and DJ Williams, out of Kentucky and Arizona, respectively. So, you know, you always like to give those guys a shot, especially in games in the preseason. So it's not great for Chase. But as is always the case, it's opportunities for other guys.
Okay. And then we've talked about the offensive line, and we know outsides are pretty set. Inside is kind of where we're taking a look at who might be in some of these different spots. And you mentioned how nice it is to be able to take a look at multiple guys, try some different combinations before you really feel like you got to start hammering in on that chemistry. So what are some of the looks that we've seen so far?
Yeah, you're right. We're good with Tristan and Luke Edeke. And then Cody Mox, I think, is pretty solidified at right guard. Yesterday, I don't know what the impetus for this question, but somebody asked Todd Bowles if there was any consideration of moving Cody to the left side. Not sure why, but he said no. So what we're looking at is who's going to start center and who's going to start at left guard. And as we said after day one, Robert Hainsey was running with the first team like he has started at center the last 2 years, so that's perfectly reasonable. But Graham Barton is a guy they think could be the starting center. And I thought at the time we're probably going to see some mixing around with the first team from day to day like we did last year at a couple spots. And sure enough, Graham Barton was getting first team reps yesterday. We could see it go back to Robert Hainsey today. Who knows? But they're gonna try different people out. You know, like at left guard it could be it's been Ben Bredeson for the most part, but Suo Pena could get his shot, or some other guys. So they're going to continue to do that, I believe.
For my fun fact of the day about a player, based on my research that I'm doing, Ben Bredeson has essentially a photographic memory.
What?
I don't believe he's ever been truly tested, but that he knew like multiplication tables by 5, taught himself to read by 3, took the ACT in 6th grade, and scored better than in the 75th percentile of people that take the ACT as a 6th grader. Smart man.
Yeah, I guess
I don't think he's going to struggle with the playbook.
I think that's called, because I was just listening to a book where a character has that. I think it's called hyperphagia.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Photographic memory is just
crazy.
fascinating to me.
I wish I had that.
I know. It would make everything a lot easier, wouldn't it? And then continuing on the offensive line a little bit. So Tristan Wirfs, you know, we talked about the idea that we didn't really know coming in. Is he going to be practicing? Is he not? Because there's been some stuff going on with his contract lately. But he has been out there and practicing these first few days, which I'm sure makes everybody very happy.
Yeah, and some of his teammates have commented on that. And the fact that he also took part in OTAs, and that, you know, he doesn't have to be out here. And a lot of players in this position just would not be here, or they wouldn't be on the practice field. They'd be holding in, as they say. Now, there's been some concession to that. I mean, he's basically doing the indies and stuff, but he's not really doing a bunch of team stuff. Justin School's been starting for the most part with the offensive line at left tackle, but he's here and he's working, and his teammates clearly appreciate that.
Yeah, which is a very big deal. And then we also talked about Chris Godwin, that people have just been singing his praises here to early start of camp, of him looking like he is peak form Chris Godwin, which I'm sure has everyone just so excited on that offensive side of the ball. And I know we got a chance to hear from him a little bit and just kind of his reaction to getting some of that praise.
Yeah, and, you know, we know what he's like. He's not going to let that praise go to his head,
just
right?
such a humble dude.
Well, and he's so concerned with being ready and good every single practice. But he does agree that one more year removed from that injury in 2021, he said he came back in 22 and had a good year but didn't feel quite right. And then last year he felt better, but he said this year he thinks he's ready to make the next leap and get back to, as I think it was Mike Evans that said, he looked like he was in his 2019 form when he was at the peak of his powers. And he's still in the prime of his career, so there's no reason to believe he can't do that. But it's good to hear that he feels like he agrees with what people are seeing, that he feels like, yes,
he feels good.
He's 1 year more removed from that injury, and 1 year better in terms of getting back to his main form.
That's great. All right, we're going to take another break here real quick. We want you to see a quick look at our newest addition, Graham Barton, mic'd up, and then we'll be back with more.
Yeah, the palm trees are such an illusion. It's like, look how beautiful. No, it's hot. I'm sitting there, I'm like, I'm kind of tired. I was like, is anyone else tired? All right, good. Yeah, not just me. I'm like, am I out of shape, or is everyone tired? I think I need to go invest in a good sunscreen. Oh, really?
They have every FPS in there.
Oh, gotcha. SPF.
Just really think about, man, I'm putting an imprint on that turf.
Breeze came at the right time. I heard the sponge bath is the way to go. Woo. Oh, I'm great. That's incredible. Mental reset. Yeah. Now's the sacrifice, but November, December, I feel like.
There's no doubt. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Get low 80s, 70s.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Welcome back into Training Camp Report presented by Advent Health. Our final segment here, we have talked a bit about battles for starting spots. We haven't as much gotten into kind of the weeds of the who might make the 53
Right.
yet.
Although that's important too.
That's a huge part of it that I know we'll end up talking about a ton as camp goes on. So looking back at last year and then this year, who are some of the guys last year that were the lesser known names, the guys that were later draft picks or undrafted free agents that were able to make it, and are there guys like that that we're betting on for this year?
If you had, in May of last year, if you had said that Christian Izzian, Rakim Jarrett, Marquise Watts, who was a tryout player to start with, Kayvon Merriweather, and Keenan Isaac, all undrafted rookies, would make the 53-man roster coming out of camp, you could have made $1 million.
Yeah, it's incredible.
That. So we don't know yet. Who are those people going to be? Because there will be some. There's always some. There may not be 5 again this year, but there will be some. And we're talking about undrafted rookies and maybe the 7th-round draft picks and things like that, because 7th-round draft pick isn't a lot to make the team.
No, definitely
either.
not.
Although I will point out that of the 23 players the Bucs have drafted over the last 3 years, 22 are on the roster right now.
That's incredible.
It's
And
pretty good.
such a testament to Jason Light and his staff and what they've been able to do.
I mean, the 7 this year are obvious. They wouldn't be cut yet. But still, 15 of the other 16, that means you've done well. Well, let's put it this way. That means you've done well if the team is winning.
Yeah.
If they had 2 bad years, then maybe
Then
you just
maybe
didn't have
not
a lot
so
of
much,
talent.
yeah.
But
But
if
no,
you can
that's
do
true.
that and win, that's a good
And
sign.
they always say that's how you build a good team, is through the draft, right?
Yeah,
That's the way
100%,
that,
yeah.
especially when it comes to the salary cap and what that lets you do for those years, and like you want to keep your homegrown talent. Like that's just the goal always, is for it to
Draft.
be through the draft. And
Draft and develop and hopefully re-sign.
yeah, it looks like they've been doing that. So yeah, so this year, who are some of the names that you're looking at as potentials for who could be
Right.
what we're talking about next year? Of hey, this guy made it.
These might be names that maybe some fans watching haven't heard yet. Maybe they just simply haven't heard their name, period. Like, I mean, Rachaad White, that's Sean Peterson. These are undrafted rookies, and any one of them can make it. But the one I wanted to point out was wide receiver Cameron Johnson, who's wearing number 9. So sometimes you'll see number 9 running around. You think
Yeah,
Joe
Joe
Tryon
Tryon, wait a
really
minute,
shrunk,
yeah.
but they're both wearing 9 at the moment. You have to double up sometimes with 91 players on the roster. But he's a guy from Barton College, which I had not heard of before, and they've never had a player in the NFL.
And not Graham Barton's school.
That would have been good.
That would have been great.
But no, they didn't have a pro day or anything, but one of our scouts happened to be there and watch. I think they were looking at some other player, but he saw him, and so the Bucs had interest. They brought him in. He's kind of a little bit like Devin Tompkins, although he's a little bit taller and a little bit thicker. But he's kind of a smaller guy who just makes a lot of plays, has good speed, and he really looked good in the offseason work. To the point, I think it was Chase Edmonds, I think, who somebody tweeted about Cameron Johnson, and he responded, that guy's going to make the team. So he's a guy that the Buccaneers are excited about. It's going to be hard for any young guys to make the active roster because you can easily count 4 or 5 receivers you can feel pretty confident are going to make the roster. So there's not a lot of spots available, but especially if he could also show something in the return game, he could have a shot.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know another one is Tyreek Funderburk, cornerback, who
Good call.
your favorite saying, of course, you can never have too many cornerbacks.
You beat me
that
to it.
already seems like that leads to him having a better shot at
Right.
it if Coach Bowles shares your philosophy.
Well, he did. He said he did
Yep.
this spring. Now, if it's kind of like last year when the Buccaneers had a whole bunch of, they felt like they had a lot of talent at outside linebacker, and they usually would only keep 5, but they kept 6 for the first time since he's been here because they don't want to let that out the building. And I think that's the same thing with corner. If you got a cornerback that you think has NFL talent, that he could eventually play in the NFL, you don't want to let that guy go. Now, Tyreek Funderburk is another guy that looked good during the OTAs. He's a ball hawk. He spent his last 2 college years at Richmond and then Appalachian State, and in each year he had 4 interceptions. So he's getting his hands on the football, and he's fast. So, I mean, if you've got good ball skills, good instincts, and you're fast, if you got good footwork, you really got a shot. So he's a guy I would keep an eye on.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then also, I know you mentioned the outside linebacker idea and how they were really high on some people last year. So Marquise Watt's one of the guys you mentioned that the tryout player who was able to make it. And then Jose Ramirez was one of those low draft picks that you talked about. And he stuck around, but mainly practice squad and that kind of thing last year. So are those 2 guys, especially now, we talked about Shaq is gone, and what does that look like for the rotation? Do you see these guys having more of a chance to make the roster and really get some playing time?
Yeah, so as you said, Marquise Watts was an undrafted rookie who made the team, but he really didn't get to play a ton. But when he did play, he looked pretty good. He had only 26 pass rush snaps on defense during the season. He had 8 quarterback pressures on those 26 snaps. That is a huge number. So it's too small of a sample size to read much into it, but it does show him, hey, maybe this guy, if he got more playing time, could really do something. And then, as you said, Jose Ramirez didn't make the active roster, but they liked him and they kept him on the practice squad all year. And so for him now, the leap is to try to take the next step and make the active roster. So we'll see how that goes. But I talked to Coach Edwards, George Edwards, the other day, and he said both those guys are way beyond where they were a year ago.
That's great. That's a great sign. And then how about, we talked mainly about the undrafted guys, but like you said, some of those low draft picks, not a lock for them to make it. Devin Culp, we mentioned him a little bit the other day of how we both were so shocked at how big he was to still be as fast as he is.
Yeah.
And looking at, we did say that, it looks like maybe Liam Coen's offense, there's not going to be maybe as many snaps to go around for tight ends. If that's the case, how does that affect a guy like Devin Culp? What would be the thing that maybe gets him on that roster, gets him on the team?
I'm really interested in Devin Culp, and he's so you can keep an eye on these guys. He's number 82, and I should have said Tyreek Vandenberg's 24, I believe. Jose Ramirez is 55. 33, and Marquise Watts is 58. So he's 82. I'm really intrigued by him. I think it's an interesting story. It's maybe not one of the top line stories, but one I'm keeping an eye on because, like you said, we were surprised at how big he was, and he was drafted because he's so fast and makes plays with the ball in his hands. He's a little bit different than all the other tight ends that we have. So it's going to be hard for those guys to get snaps, but I'm interested to see what he can do.
Interesting. And then finally, a defensive lineman whose name is phenomenal.
This is a deep cut.
Deep cut. I love it. Deep cut.
Number 75, Lual Uguak.
I was going to let you say it. I was like, I'm not even going to try.
I think his family immigrated here from Sudan, so he's Sudanese. So that seems like an unusual name for us. It could be very common in Sudan. But Lual, it's spelled L-W-A-L, Uguak, U-G-U-A-K. He most recently played in the CFL. He went to school in Texas. I'm blanking on which one. I think TCU. He didn't get drafted, didn't get signed by a team, so he went to the Canadian League. He got drafted by them, actually, and he ended up on the championship team, the Montreal Alouettes. And by the end of the season, by the middle of the season, he was a starter, and he was a really good player up there. So the Bucs gave him a look. I thought, this is an untrained, I'm not a scout, but when we were watching OTAs in the spring and in the mini camps, and they're doing the D-line drills where they're running through bags, I thought he looked really nimble with good feet. So deep cut there, but keep an eye on number 75. You never know.
I love it. And hey, that's the fun stuff to watch during preseason games too. Like you get to these fourth quarters of some of these preseason games, you want to have these guys to root for, to look at their story, to keep watching there at the end.
And also remember that there's 16 practice squad spots, and we devoted at least 2 of them all last year to defensive linemen. So every player should and probably does have the goal of making the roster out here, but if that doesn't happen, it's a great start to your career to make a practice squad.
That's very true. All right, that's going to do it for us on this edition of Training Camp Report presented by Advent Health. Tomorrow is the first off day for the team, so we will not be doing a show then, but we'll be back here on Sunday for another edition of the show when they are back at practice, so we'll see you then.